This is David Hurley of davidhurleyinjapan.com, and today I want to show you how I have developed a chess opening repertoire for white using the 1d4 opening repertoire system that is given to us by John Watson in a strategic chess opening repertoire for white, which I've been reading through and studying over the last 3 years or so. When I started studying this book, I was going through it in quite a lot of detail, putting all the moves of each variation of this repertoire down here and showing their relationships where one variation branches off from another, page after page of this kind of thing, which was all very educational, but it was very difficult to commit this stuff to memory or even to make any use of it over the board, because it all became all confused and messed up and mixed up in my addled pate. So sometime last year, I decided to try and systematize this, all the awesome source that John Watson gives us. I would not try to analyze the whole thing right through to the 35th move of each variation, but instead I would skim off the first few moves, like only the first 5 moves or the first up to about the first 15 moves, depending on the variation. And I would put those into order as they appear in the book. And then I would number them and see how many of these variations there were. It turned out there are 186 variations. And I would then apply a memory system to these 186 variations. Here are some of them. You can see these ones I'm trying to remember to the 12th, the 10th move, the 6th move there in that one. But in many cases, I'm only remembering the first few moves of an opening variation. For example, here, this is the Albin counter gambit. The Albin counter gambit, I've just got 3 variations I'm using in this memory system. And the first one only goes to the first 5 moves. The second one also 5, I think that is. And the third one is to the 8th move. So not too demanding on the old brain. However, when you've got 186 of these opening variations, that does become somewhat demanding. And so I am committing them to memory using a memory system that I bought when I was a teenager, advertised in the newspapers in Britain in the 1980s, I suppose. Dr. Bruno First's memory system. He sold this 12 lesson course. Plus, you got a dictionary thrown in, a little pocket dictionary, paperback dictionary, and some other books and bits and pieces. And the system is called the Major System. It's a mnemonic system that ties the digits 1 to 9 and 0 to specific consonants in the Arabic alphabet, the ABC, and from that you can then tie a key word to any number using the consonant sounds. I'll show you how that works in a minute. Actually, there's 184 variations. 184. There we go. The very last variation. 10 moves, I call it the diver, using this mnemonic memory system. Why is number 184 called the diver in my memory system? Well, let me show you how it works. We have the first 10 digits, or the first 9 digits plus 0 are the key digits. Each digit is associated with a letter, or actually more strictly speaking, a consonant or a couple of consonant sounds, related consonant sounds. So number 1 is T. And when we learned this, we were taught, you can remember that 1 is T because T has only 1 downstroke. So number 1 is T. Number 2 is N, that has 2 downstrokes. And so that's how you remember that. And number 3, number 3 No, is that the right way around, or is it that way around? Number 3, anyway, you turn it this way around and you get M. Number 4, well, R is like a sort of upside down 4 or a backwards 4 or something. Number 5 is law. I have no idea why. Number 6 is jaw. So L, J. Number 7 is K. Perhaps it looks a little bit like K. Number 8 is phi. Perhaps a curly F becomes an 8 or something. Number 9, well, the mirror image of number 9 is P. And 0 is simply S or Z. And once we have those consonants associated with those digits, we then give each one a name, and it should be a noun, something that is fairly easy to imagine or remember. Now, this is the list of words that Dr. Bruno first devised for his memory system, and I just learnt them pat off by heart, and so I'm kind of stuck with these. However, they're not too difficult to create images for, because the whole point of this memory system is you create a clear, slightly crazy image. The stranger, the better, and you can then turn that image back into the number that you want to remember. Or you can do what I'm trying to do in this opening repertoire memory system, is associate a keyword with a specific variation in the order that I've laid them out from 1 through to 184. So number 1 is T, number 2 is Noah, number 3 is May, number 4 is Ray, then we have law, jaw, key, phi, P, and then when we get to number 10, we now have two consonant sounds to help us remember. We have the T from number 1, from the 1 digit, and we have S or Z from the 0, and we put them together and we get ts. And so from there, we make a word. The vowels are not counted at all, so we can make any kind of word. It gives us a lot of flexibility. And so the word that I use for 10 is toes. I imagine some wriggling toes somehow associated with whatever it is that I want to remember. And so we go on. Yes, now I go right through to 184. There are 184 variations, and I was asking earlier, how is it that I came up with the word diver to remember the 184th variation? And that is simply because number 1 is T or D. It's T or D. And number 8 is F or V. And number 4 is R. So the word we have T or D, we have F or V, and we have R. And we make a word up with some variation of those. So I came up with the image. Either I came up with it myself or I checked online. There are some lists online which offer lots of word choices for you to select. So I came up with the word diver because that is a nice, easy image to remember. My father used to listen to that radio comedy program. Was it Around the Horn or something? And one of the catchphrases there was, "Don't forget the diver, sir," which he often said. And I always had this image of a deep sea diver in his diving suit and his lead boots and all that, dropped off the boat and is kind of forgotten about underwater. So diver for me is a fairly easy image to imagine and then to plug into a story that will remind me of the move order of the chess opening repertoire that I am developing here in this way. Let me give you another image to show you how this all works. So what I do, you can probably see here, each variation is numbered, and the numbers is simply more or less the order in which the variations are presented in John Watson's book. So that's how the numbers go. I didn't have to do that from scratch. I just copied this stuff out more or less in order, following John Watson's journey through his repertoire. And what that gives me is several what I consider the key numbers, the really important ones to remember, and they are the first variation of each opening system within the D4, the 1D4 opening repertoire. So when white plays 1D4, black has a number of choices, of course, and it can lead into variations such as the Queen's Gambit declined, the Queen's Gambit accepted, the Slav, the martial defense, the semi-Slav, the Nimzo-Indian, the what's after that? After Nimzo-Indian is the King's Indian and the Grunfeld, and then there's massive Benoni variations as well. And after that, there's some of the others as well, the Dutch and all that kind of thing. Now, I haven't got this memory system down pat for all 184 variations. In fact, this year's project is to create the stories that would enable me to do that. But I have started work on the early part of the repertoire, which I'm more familiar with. And I can give an example of how it would work. So the first variation I've just mentioned, those systems within the D4 repertoire. So number one is T, and T introduces the Queen's Gambit declined, because that is what John Watson leads with in his book. Usually 1D4 repertoire books begin with the Queen's Gambit declined. And then I have listed a list of 16 variations of the Queen's Gambit declined. And we're only looking at the first 5 to 10, possibly 15 moves. So, of course, beyond that, there are many other branches that flow out. But we're only looking at the first few moves. And so in that way, we can kind of control. We don't have too much we don't have the overwhelming stuff to deal with that I was finding struggling with when I was going through the book, looking at every single variation right through to the 35th move. So we have 16 variations. And then the 17th is a very important keyword to remember. 17 is 1 is t, and 7 is k. And so you put t and k together. And a word I find easy to remember is tack, one of those thumb tacks that you can push, pin a piece of paper, a notice to a cork board or something. And so tack. And tack, number 17, introduces the Queen's Gambit accepted. And in that, I simply imagine that when in the Queen's Gambit accepted, let me just show you the opening moves of the Queen's Gambit accepted. It is 1, D4, D5, C4, and then this is the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now, I imagine this move here. Here is our thumb tack, and he pins himself down into C4. And that, my friends, is how I remember that 17 is the Queen's Gambit accepted. Now I have to tell a longer story to cover the moves that follow the Queen's Gambit, the second move, of the Queen's Gambit accepted. And to show you how I do that, I will talk about the 36th variation. 36 now, 36 made up of 3 and 6. So 3 is M, so we have M, and 6 is J or J, so mudj. Now, this is the Epiphany season, and for me, with my background, it's simply dead easy to imagine it as the Magi. Mudj. Well, okay, the spelling is M-A-G-I, but G-I in English still makes the sound J, so we have the Magi. So number 36 is the Magi. And how does that help me to remember? What does it tell me? Well, the Magi is the first variation of the semi-Slav. So number 36, the Magi, introduces the semi-Slav. It's one of the key openings that I have in this kind of key list here of where the variations are introduced in this repertoire. So Magi. What is the story of the Magi, and how can we use that story to remember this key variation of the semi-Slav? Well, let me show you what the variation is and tell the story. Or shall I tell the story and show you the variation? Well, the story of the Magi is that three wise men look up into the sky and they see a star, and they begin to follow the star that shines brightly in the sky. Now, the star is not always clearly seen in the sky. It is sometimes occluded by black clouds and things like that. But then the star is seen shining brightly over Judea, and it leads the wise men to King Herod. And King Herod comes out to meet them on his black horse and tells them to follow the star and then come back and report to him so that he can also worship this new king. And the star moves on and descends over the stable in Bethlehem. Now, what do we find in stables? We find horses. And so this little story will play out in this key semi-Slav opening repertoire that I need to remember. This introduces the first of several semi-Slav variations. In fact, there are 5 semi-Slav variations in this memory system. So from 36 plus 5, we come to the rat. So 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. And then after that, 41 is rat. And the rat introduces the Nimzo-Indian. But that's another story. So here, let's have a look at the semi-Slav opening variation called the Magi. So we need to go back to the start. Now, this is a D4 opening repertoire, so we always open with D4, and it goes D5, C4. So we have 2 of our wise men here, the D4 and the C4 pawn. They have set out on their journey. Now, this is a semi-Slav. It's easy enough for you. You don't need a memory system to tell you that the semi-Slav consists of the semi-Slav consists of this opening set of moves. It makes a nice triangular setup for black. The semi-Slav third move is E6. Now, from here, we can kick in with the story of the wise men traveling to find this new baby king or god. And so here comes the rather tardy third of the 3 wise men. So we now have our 3 wise men are out. He's a little bit slow, so he's hanging back. Perhaps he's looking for his horse, who knows. But then what happens? Well, the star is somewhat occluded. They're wandering around, don't really know what they're trying to do. There's this great black cloud comes out and seems to be shielding or hiding the star. In fact, it completely gobbles up the star. So they have no idea where they are going to go. But then the next morning, or would it be the next evening, whenever stars rise clearly in the sky, there is a cloudless sky, and they see the star and they rejoice when they see it. And they see the star like the Queen of Heaven, floating clear and free in the sky. So it's that queen to G5, taking that F5 pawn, which took the G5 pawn. The queen floats out in the sky. This is the Star of Bethlehem. Now, this Star of Bethlehem, which the 3 wise men report to King Herod and tell him about, causes him to get on his horse and come out and have a look. Say, oh, what's going on over here? Have a look at this star in the sky. And he then tells the wise men, as you know, to proceed to Bethlehem, worship this new king, and let me know where he is so I can come and kill him. So they go on their way. The Star of Bethlehem descends over the stable where the King of Glory lies, and in the stable we have our sleeping horse. This the knight here. I mean, quite often the knight will make an early move, but this little detail reminds us that the knight doesn't actually move. It's the queen that does this action. And these, my friends, are the opening moves of the 36th variation of my D4 memory system. It's called the Magi, and it's called the Magi simply because it is the 36th in the series. It is a mere coincidence that the 36 variation of my memory system has this movement sequence, which rather fits nicely into the story of the Magi. I went into a bit too much detail about the Magi, but just to tell that story, all I need to remember is that the star shines clearly in the sky. It's the queen, and she will then retreat down over the knight here, G2, when threatened by this Herod knight here, the Black Knight of King Herod. So in this way, we can create for ourselves a memory system that will tie in order, in sequence, opening variations for the D4 opening repertoire. And by telling these stories, we will become very familiar with what each variation is and where it fits in. And then, once we have our stories set, we can watch in this case, what black is doing. And we may often find that the story is not going to plan because black is not doing black is not following the plot. And in fact, when black is not following the plot at the pub chess bluffer level, it quite probably means that black has lost the plot. And so if you begin to understand the openings in this way, very often you can create for yourself out of the gate an early advantage that will lead you, if you don't blunder your way through the middle game, will lead you to, at the very least, a draw. And as you're white, you can hope for a victory. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you'd like to follow me, then please click the subscribe button and hit that bell so that next time I upload a video to my channel, you will get notified. That's all from me, David Hurley of David Hurley in Japan and EasyChessTips.com.